nice to finally see you. Sort of in person.
Yeah, virtual.
I guess I'll just go and introduce you to anyone who's joining. This is Nicole Swingle. She's a registered dietitian, and she is really into lifting. From her Instagram account, The Lifting Dietitian, she does a lot of like lifting related videos, and she also has a book that she wrote called Lift the Bar, Level Up Your Relationship with Christ and Your Lifting. So that's just a general intro. And I'm so glad you're able to join me on this video.
I'm very happy to be here. So thanks for the invite.
Yeah. I guess we can just jump right into the questions then. The first one is just kind of like, what led you to study nutrition?
I'll have to kind of give a little bit of background for this. So, when I was younger, like much younger, in elementary school, I was pretty active, and then I started gaining weight, and I actually was overweight for quite some time, in middle school, and that's kind of when I started my own health and like fitness journey. And just how I started that was just eating healthier and losing weight. And over a span of years, I lost 75 pounds. And then in high school, you know, everyone asks you, what are you going to do when you get older? And then one of the projects that we actually had in high school was just to interview some people that we knew. It could be a relative, and then some others were supposed to be outside of our relatives. So I was just interviewing some people, and my mom's friend, Teresa, she actually brought to my attention that a dietitian was something I should look into. And I didn't even know what a dietitian was at the time. What even is that? So I had to research it a bit. And it was exactly what I would love to do. So through my progress and journey through losing that weight, then I found that, and I just wanted to help people to basically kind of do the same thing if they chose to, that is, to get healthier and to get fit. And for them just to bypass all of the nonsense that's out there, because there's a lot of misinformation about nutrition, and everyone has an opinion on nutrition, but not all the opinions are necessarily correct. So that's kind of just why I went into being a dietitian.
That's really cool. It sounds like you kind of figured that out from like a young age, and kind of your personal story really impacted that.
Luckily. That's not the case.
It's cool how you're saying too, kind of how you wanted to kind of feed your voice through kind of all of the noise when it comes to like what healthy eating is supposed to look like. I think that's really important today. Yeah. And then one of the things I was curious about is just kind of like, what is one of the things that was like one of the most practical things you learned, or just helpful or interesting that you learned when you were studying nutrition?
I would say there's a couple. So one, and you'll probably get this from any dietitian, but nutrition is definitely individualized for the person. But one of the most practical things that I could teach anyone today, it would probably be that your eating patterns over time really do matter. So usually people get caught up in like, oh, I had a cheat meal and that's bad, or, you know, whatever connotation they have with food, or, oh, I did horrible this week and I'll restart on Monday, or whatever it is. That doesn't necessarily matter, but what you eat over time does. And I'll give you an example of how that's case in point, basically. So if someone has, like, let's say they had a bunch of refined carbohydrates and they have like little produce in their diet, and they're kind of sedentary, over time that can impact them. And now different conditions and diseases do have like genetic predisposition and other factors as well. But that sort of eating can help someone to develop type 2 diabetes, for example, later on in life. And so that's just like one thing over time that can actually impact your health.
Oh, cool. That's good to know. And then, so kind of the whole goal of this account, Nutrition Branch, is to make healthy eating more accessible for everyone by just kind of overcoming hurdles like cost and time and that sort of thing. So just one of the questions I'd love to know is if you have any tips or tricks on how to save money on groceries, or if you have any strategies to overcoming some of those hurdles.
Yeah, so I actually do have a really big passion for like food insecurity and stuff like that. So with different food banks and actually help to do different demos just to help people to have that access. So one thing, if anyone is in that situation personally, if they have food insecurity, if you could connect with like a local food bank or some churches do some things like this too, but they'll do either obviously like food donations or they sometimes will bring like a dietitian on, especially if it's like a nonprofit. They'll bring them on to do food demos. So if someone could check that out. But in terms of grocery bills, one of the easiest ways to save money is to always like look on whatever grocery store you go to, regardless of what it is. Look at their grocery ad, and then that tends to also, whatever's on sale tends to also be in season. So right now you wouldn't see like strawberries on sale probably because it's winter. You would probably see like pears or you could see pomegranates on sale. So those are kind of like more winter fruits. So that's one way to save. Another way would just to like eat in bulk. So some of the stores, especially if they get like really big wholesale prices, they'll have like bins of rice, let's say, or beans, where you could buy that in bulk at a much cheaper rate than you could if it's like the convenient, like put in the microwave, like rice that's $3 versus like if you bought it in bulk and just cooked it on the stove, that'd be like way cheaper and more cost effective for you. And then the only other thing that I can really think of that would save a lot of money for someone is sometimes the stores in their ads, the paper ads, they'll still have the coupons, but otherwise I would say to download their app, they usually have mobile coupons that you could just click and scan and save that way as well.
Cool. That's a lot of great advice. Thanks for sharing. And then kind of we touched on this a little bit earlier, just kind of how you're trying to sort through all the noise, but when it comes to nutrition, what are some of your thoughts on diet culture in general and then certain diets like veganism or the keto diet and that sort of thing?
So diet culture, I think it definitely can perpetuate a negative relationship with either yourself or with food. Most commonly those are put together. And ultimately, like, I think that diet culture leads people just to failure because usually when they hop on a fad diets in some way, shape, or form have a restriction either on a specific food or food group, or it's heavily restricted in calories. So just people at like a disadvantage, especially if they are trying to lose weight in like a rapid way, which is often a pitfall. That's usually why they kind of cling on to those fad diets. Oh, this is the magic thing, so let's just hop on it, lose weight really quickly, and then when you stop the diet, you just go back to the way that you're eating, and it doesn't actually really help you for that long-term success. So falling into that yo-yo dieting is like the term for it, just to kind of recycle on different diets. It's not helpful for you long-term. It can perpetuate like I think this food is bad or this food is good, and just to kind of, it could lead to eating disorders down the road too.
That's interesting that you said kind of like this food is bad, this food is good. Because I heard, and I just love to hear your thoughts on this. I heard someone say, she was kind of a sports nutritionist, and she was saying how she feels that every food has a purpose, like in some circumstance, like even, a soda, maybe for an endurance athlete who's running like a marathon or something. I'm interested to know if you feel the same way or if you have a different opinion.
Yeah, I think that all foods fit into any healthy eating pattern, and specifically like with endurance athletes, like their nutrition and what they would have on a normal everyday basis is going to be different from someone who's playing basketball to someone who is strength training a lot. So yes, that kind of carb source, like endurance athletes who are running like miles and miles a day just for training, for if they're just doing a marathon or a triathlon or whatever it might be, they're gonna need a lot more carbs. So a quick carb source, especially if they're like mid-run, sometimes like people will usually have like different like gels is usually like a quick little kind of easy grab out of like their backpack or whatever to quickly grab and just have some sugar just to help them for workout. So yes, I do agree.
That feeds pretty well into my next question, which is just kind of when you started lifting, how did your diet change, or how would you recommend athletes change their diets or alter their diets to meet those needs?
Yeah, so with my own personal diet, I did increase my protein a little bit, but I actually increased my carbs a lot. So, if I could give advice, you probably aren't eating enough carbs, especially if you're paying attention to media. That's like the it's not really new. It's just it happened way back in the day, and reoccurring again that people are scared of carbs. So, if anything, I would probably say you might not be eating enough carbs. So just to make sure that you are either fueling your workout and having carbs before, or if you're replenishing the glycogen after your workout as well, would be important.
Okay, cool. And then I'd love to know how you first got into lifting in general.
So trailing back to the first question, how I got into nutrition when I started losing weight. So and then I started trying build back my fitness again. I did do track and field in middle school, but I actually got introduced, and I continued in high school, but got introduced to lifting in high school. And so I did like a 4x2, and I did throwing events. And so my throwing coach is the one who like threw us in the gym and like, okay, we're going to start like lifting. And that's when I started just learning more about it, and I fell in love with it, honestly. Like, I love the challenge of it. I love the discipline that you have to have for it. And you can always set a different type of goal. It doesn't have to be something like one particular way. If I wanted to, set a PR in squats, or if I wanted to do this with deadlifts, or even it could be a small goal like, hey, like my mobility is not great, I want to work on that. So it's just kind of like a refining process. But I fell in love with it.
It's cool to say you started in high school, because I actually just started taking a fitness class this year at my school, and so I started lifting for the first time, and it's definitely very empowering to be able to lift a clear certain weights.
The weight, it's very empowering for sure.
Yeah. So how would you recommend someone who's interested in getting into lifting start, or maybe start if they don't have access to a gym or certain resources? How would you recommend they get into it?
So the first thing that I would probably recommend is to focus on compound movements. And like making sure that you know the form and the technique, just so one, you know what you're doing, but two, just to prevent injury. And so I do have resources too, if anyone is interested in like how to do a certain movement, or if they want home workout kind of like routines, I have some free resources I could give them. You could just send me a DM.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
So a compound movement is basically, if no one knows this right now, it's where you are doing an exercise that uses more than one muscle group at a time. So for instance, like a squat, you're not just using your quads, you're using your glutes and your abs are contracted and whatnot. An isolated movement would be like a bicep curl. Like, you're not using your quads when you're just doing a bicep curl. Like, it's just your bicep. So focusing on different compound movements and knowing those forms are going to be most beneficial, so that you can get the most bang for your buck in a sense. And then once you kind of get that down, for someone who's a beginner, I would suggest doing like full body workouts like 3 times a week. And then you can increase that and do splits when you're more intermediate.
Okay, that's very good to know. And then we kind of touched on this a little earlier, but maybe specific to lifting, before and after you start a workout, like what's the time range and the best way to fuel?
Yeah, so that depends on like the intensity of your workout, what kind of workout you're doing, when you ate last. So it's very customized. But I would say if someone is working out like less than 45 minutes, like it's a pretty short workout, you probably don't necessarily need to fuel for that before. If it's like an hour or above, that's relatively intense, then I would suggest definitely have something. And you could either have like a meal before, like 2 to 3 hours before, and then make sure you're having like protein and carbs. Or if you want to do a quick snack before, like about an hour before your workout, you could do like a banana and like a protein source of protein source of your choice. And then after a workout, for a meal, the kind of guideline that I would usually tell people to go by is to have about like half your plate of color, so that'd be like vegetables, and then a fourth of it to be like a complex carb source, if that's brown rice, if it's potatoes, or whatever that you like, and then the other fourth to be a protein source. So if that's chicken or if that's beef or whatever. But kind of roughly, that's kind of like a good recovery meal.
Very cool. And then similarly, kind of also with your training, do you have any strength training tips? We kind of talked a little bit about this with just kind of how to start, but specific to strength.
Yeah. So definitely the compound movements that I was talking about. Compound movements should be implemented in every workout, like not all of them, unless you're doing a full body workout, but definitely including some of those. Another suggestion would just be to warm up before you start lifting. So make sure that you are warmed, your muscles are good, so that can prevent injury. I usually do some dynamic stretching before my workout just to help. And that's a dynamic stretch is just like a stretch that's a movement. So if I'm doing like leg swings before, like let's say. Another suggestion is you could probably go longer than you think. So it's a mind over matter. Like you could probably push for more reps than you initially tell yourself. So push through that because that's going to help you to tear that muscle and to get stronger and continue that process over and over. And then I would just say for building strength, if you are scared, so some people can be scared in the gym to like maybe push themselves with extra weight. So maybe they'll stay at the weight, but they want to try extra, but it's a little like intimidating. I would suggest to either bring someone that you're comfortable with to spot you or just simply ask someone in the gym to spot you just in case. So you kind of have that reassurance. You can kind of push yourself a little bit longer. That's just another helpful tip. Yeah. Cool.
And I'd love to hear how, like, what inspired you to write your book.
So God, I'm a Christian. God put it on my heart in 2019 to initially do. And I'll be honest, and I had I call it FUD. It's fear, uncertainty, doubt, just kicking. So I let the enemy come in and basically tell me like, oh, you shouldn't do this, or who are you to write this, and that kind of thing that honestly made me stop and just kind of push it to the side. And then May 31st of 2020, I actually got in a car accident. So I was going from one highway to another. I was just going on the on-ramp, and I slowed down toward the on-ramp, and I felt my left tire swing out. And I started spinning, and in that moment, what I can describe to you is it was very surreal. It was very fast and like slow all at the same time. And when I felt that kick out, I probably had the most intimate conversation I've probably ever had with the Lord. I was just asking like, God, am I going to die today? And once I said that, I felt like this bubble or the shield around me. This is really the only best way I can describe it is that around me. And then I was spinning in 360s after that, and then I hit the front. My front hit the concrete wall, so like on the on-ramp, like the concrete eventually like leaves, but I hit that concrete and I continued going in 360s, and then all of a sudden it just stopped. And I got out of the car, and it was just like an inch away, and I don't even know how I didn't hit that again. I don't know how I even honestly walked out of that car without hitting my head at all. I wasn't injured. I just was swept away clean. I smelled rubber everywhere. I was thinking that the engine was going to blow up and afraid to get home. So many other questions that popped in my head. But after the collision, and just like praying to God again, and the next day just thanking him for saving me, because honestly I give that to God that he did that. If I would be here today if it wasn't for him. He put that on my heart again, and I was like, okay. So I just started writing literally June 1st the next day, and I published it that December.
Wow.
So
that's a super cool story to share and to have that kind of testimony for your book. Would you be willing to share just kind of like what is generally kind of the summary of it, or?
So it's a Bible study. So it if no one's done a Bible study before on this live stream, it's 6 weeks, and each week has about 5 days in it. And normally in a Bible study, you'll go through each day personally, and then at the end, if you're doing it with someone, there's usually discussion questions that you'll talk to each other. So whether that's in a church, I left those there for if anyone wanted to do it in a group. So if it's if someone's doing it in a group, if you're just doing it with a friend, or if you're doing it on a sports team together, that's kind of how it's laid out. The book is premised on helping Christian athletes to help their relationship and to develop it deeper with the Lord. So elevating their relationship with Christ, as well as helping them with their training. So each week goes through a principle that's in the Bible that's also applicable for your training, and to help you to really dive into the Word and to understand, like, hey, what's God speaking to you right now? And just to look both spiritually, how can I improve with this principle? And then with my training, how can I improve with this principle? And it just kind of goes through the 6 different principles.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And then I just kind of have a couple of people who are asking kind of weight loss related questions. It's a bit of a jump in topic. But the first one was, are there any answers to losing fat and keeping it off long term?
Yes, it's not anything that's easy. The clients that I work with, we go through a lot of discussion on their eating habits, their patterns. We dive into their struggles. So it's really from the standpoint of, if you want to lose weight or fat specifically and keep it off, it's starting to develop healthier habits and create that behavior change. So that takes a lot of work. It's not a simple, like, do this 30-day challenge and then you're going to lose weight. It's great and it'll just stay off. It's just not that simple. So it's really establishing healthy habits to help you to lose that weight and keep it off for the long term. So it's something that's sustainable, and that you don't have to go through that whole diet culture yo-yo cycle, like lose it, gain it back, lose it, gain it back. Yeah.
And then, what role does metabolism play in losing weight?
So if we go back to like what the body does in general, you're just trying to eat food to then get that food to basically, you're consuming food that you can use it for energy to then be able to do whatever that you're doing, whether it's a reaction that your body has to do on its own, regardless of if you even move that day or not. There's just processes always happening in your body, or to help you to do like exercise or whatever it is. Where metabolism really comes into play is if people start to restrict their calorie intake too low. And so, like I said before, you're going to need a certain amount of calories just to live in and of itself. If you're just like sitting down, doing nothing that day, but literally just staying in one spot, if you're in a hospital or something, you still need, a certain amount of calories just to survive. And then obviously you have physical activity and everything on top of that. So when someone restricts their calories too low, then you're going to have like metabolic adaptation is what we call it. And so your body's going to essentially get used to the lower intake, and then you're burning less calories. It's less efficient than it was before. So my suggestion to make sure that doesn't happen is basically to eat. You have to eat enough food so that the metabolic adaptation doesn't happen. And it can happen if you're in a restriction for too long of a time, which is often the case when people do these different diets and they go in this cycle. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's really insightful. That's not what I would have thought to be the answer. I'm also interested kind of just like, when you're exercising, is that when you're burning the calories, or is it after you exercise that your body has kind of made like strength changes? I don't know if that's kind of a confusing question, where the metabolism kicks in.
I think I know what you're saying. So you do burn calories while you're exercising, and there's like minimal effect that technically after, if you're doing like very high intensive activity, that you can burn some calories afterwards just as a result from that, but it's minimal amount to like your actual like exercise. So you mainly burn those physical activity like calories during your actual workout.
Good to know. And then the last weight loss related one was, how do you make lasting changes for a healthier lifestyle? Kind of similar to answering the solution to the first one.
Yeah, so with that, I would suggest to not try too much at once. So if you're trying to develop like healthy eating or other just healthy lifestyle changes, just start with one at a time, because it's much more easy to like it's much easier to change one thing than trying to change like 5 things at once. Because if people are like, yeah, it's January 1st and I'm going to do something great and I'm going to do all these different things, and then you fail at one but like do like 2 really good ones or whatever, then you're going to start to feel failure and you like go down this whole like mental spiral that doesn't really help you. So to make lasting changes, it could literally just be as simple as increasing your water intake. Like trying to increase that to, let's say, if you wanted to go for like 10 glasses a day or something. I'm just picking a random number. But let's say you're like drinking like 8 and like you want to try and go for 10, and then you do that and you maintain that. Okay, this is easy and I'm doing this, and this is a habit now that I've implemented because I've put out, let's say, soda and I've replaced it with water or whatever. Would be the case. And then you can add something else on top of that. So I'm not getting a lot of steps in the day. Okay, how do I increase my steps? Well, I could go for a walk after dinner, and then just that's one simple way I can increase my steps each day, and just to slowly add them on rather than trying to tackle a whole bunch of things at once. But and then also just to go at it from the mindset of like, this is a lifestyle change, so I need to kind of go at it with like a marathon mentality rather than I'm sprinting to finish this and hurry up. That'll help someone to really like actually make those changes and to have that long-term success that everyone desires, but they try to go for the short term and then it doesn't pan out.
That's good advice for going into the new year, and just remembering to be patient with yourself.
Yeah, that's the struggle. Usually some people will try something new January, and then February comes around and they're like, well, I'm like, no.
Okay, and now it's time for the rapid fire questions. Some kind of miscellaneous questions that came in. So, are fresh vegetables better than frozen vegetables?
No, fresh aren't necessarily better than frozen. They're frozen, they're picked up, they're ripe, and then they're frozen, so they're not losing nutrients during the process at all. So they're perfectly healthy, and they're actually probably usually cheaper too. So if someone wants to save money, there's another way to save money.
Perfect. And then, from what foods can I consume vitamin D, and is vitamin D more important depending on like the region someone lives in?
I would say that it's important depending on the region that you live in, because if sunlight is our best source of it. So if you live somewhere that doesn't get a lot of sunlight, or you're just not outside a lot because you have an office job or whatever, then I would suggest from getting it from food first. Always food first, then supplement. So foods that are higher in vitamin D would be like a lot of fatty fish like salmon or swordfish. Then there's like fortified foods that have it, or drinks. So orange juice could be fortified with vitamin D, and mushrooms are like another good source. But if someone can't get enough, or they don't eat fish or something, they could just get a vitamin D supplement. And I would definitely suggest not like there's different ones. It would be like a D2 or a D3, and I would suggest the D3. It's more absorbable for the body. So whether that's like a pill, or if you have it in like a liquid form, which if you have the liquid form, you can just put it in your tongue, and just have a few drops a day. But yes, it does matter if depending on the region that you live in. Yeah.
Okay. And then are there kind of certain are there certain vitamins that you often see, or minerals that you often see people deficient in, and kind of also what are those foods that might?
Yeah, so one of them that I can run into, especially with women, would be iron. So iron is rich in a lot of meat sources, for example. But obviously, like women who have like their menstrual cycles, you're obviously having a lot more blood loss. So that's important. You can also get iron in like beans as well. I don't usually come into contact with people that are anemic to that extent, so they don't have that. But it is possible. I have seen some people who are anemic and they need to address that more with like either iron fortified foods, or some people actually need like elemental iron to increase that, depending on their levels. But if it is that severe.
Okay. And then do you have any thoughts on fasting kind of as a dietary idea?
That's all the hype now too. Well, fasting, honestly, so okay, basically fasting is just restricting like when you're eating. So the premise and why everyone's all hyped up on it, like, oh, I could lose weight if I fast, or I could improve like my A1C levels if I fast. You could do that the same with just eating healthy and just being in a calorie deficit.
Yeah.
And that's nothing necessarily special to fasting. Like all you're doing is restricting the time that you're eating. So if you're doing like a 16-8 is like the most popular one usually that people do, like 16 hours of fasting, and then you have this 8 hours to eat. And so if someone's fasting for however many months down the line, yes, they can lose weight. Yes, they could improve their A1C levels. However, when they go back to eating like they normally do, I would argue that you're not necessarily fixing the issue. So usually people who try that, usually in my experience, those people are people who usually struggle with portions. So when you open that window back up, then it's like, oh, then I'm still struggling with portions and I'm back in the same struggle that I had before. So like I said earlier, I work with clients and we work through that behavior change and those healthy habits. So we kind of get to the root issue rather than trying these different things that are not necessarily serving somebody, at least for the long term.
Okay, that's very good to know. I had a couple of people asking that question, so it's good to hear that answer.
For athletes, it like there aren't any studies that necessarily show that fasting has a positive impact on performance. Like there have been studies that are like some little effects or no effects on fasting in terms of performance, but there are no positive effects. So I can't necessarily argue like, yes, an athlete should fast because of this reason, you know?
Right.
So, yeah.
Good to know. That was the last one of my questions, but if you have any last thoughts that you want to share or anything.
I don't know. You guys, whoever's on this, you guys message me if you have any other questions. I'm an open book, and I love meeting new people, so feel free to message me. Other than that, can I help you in any way?
Not that I can think of right now, but it would be great if you could share those resources that we talked about. And maybe kind of a video of like dynamic warm-ups or kind of warm-ups for lifting and that sort of thing. That'd be great.
Yeah, I could just send that over to you if you could, and you can send that out to whoever.
Yeah, and I'll share that with this page, those resources.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thank you so much again for coming and chatting with me today. It was really great to hear all of your great advice.
Thank you. I appreciate you for having me.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.